Hello, this is Hardin Coleman. I'm faculty director for the Center for Character and Social Responsibility at Boston University's Wheelock College of Education and Human Development. You're listening to the very first season of Caring, Character, and Community, the Center's podcast. In this season, we will focus on learning from leaders about how they integrate the ethic of caring, a focus on their own and others' character development, and a commitment to serving the needs of the community in order to guide and inform their leadership in times of crisis. This is part three of our inaugural season, which will focus on bringing you the perspectives of youth serving based organizations. In today's episode, we'll be talking with one of my longtime friends, Will Parish, who is a credentialed public high school science educator with a 30-year record of innovative accomplishments in environmental and educational fields. He taught environmental science at Gateway High School in San Francisco and now serves on the board. He served on the California State Board of Education's Curriculum Commission and then founded 10 Strands as a nonprofit organization to support California's effort to bring environmental literacy to all K-12 students in the state. In our work, we talk a lot about system change. It is what Will does. So Will, we want to thank you for spending time with us.
Well, you're welcome, Hardin, and I'm delighted to and honored to be a part of this amazing community. So thank you for inviting me.
So could you tell us a little bit more about your organization, and then also how's this year, the past 18 months now, been for you all?
Right. So my organization is called 10 Strands, and I established 10 Strands and immediately formed a partnership with our CEO, Karen Cow, who has been completely instrumental in helping shape the future. Because what we're really set out to do was, well, I put it like this: we're the tugboat that works with the California Department of Ed to help the super tanker move toward the bountiful waters of environmental literacy. So people seem to get what 10 Strands does if I start that way, because then it puts the organization in the role of supporting the whole public school system to embrace environmental literacy. So what does that mean? It means creating the conditions under which in the classroom and outside the classroom, students can reimagine their relationship to the natural environment and appreciate the absolute interdependence that humanity has with the natural world. So that's really what 10 Strands is set up to do. Our three pillars that we're based on involve advocacy, so changing the laws and changing the frameworks, capacity building, helping county offices of ed to see the importance of an environmental literacy specialist on the staff, and then network strengthening. So it's a huge collaborative effort. And 10 Strands set up. Well, we became the operators of a network of 30 individuals at the highest levels of the county offices of ed, districts, and schools and thought leaders to really make sure that what 10 Strands is doing at the policy level is grounded in the truth of what actually works in the classroom. And I often think back to my classroom experience in terms of thinking, will that policy actually help teachers? And Karen has had experience teaching as well. So these last 18 months, I'll say, the school system went from being all in-person and hands-on to being practically all distance learning and hands-off. And that presented some real challenges for students who needed to do their studying in their classrooms in the conditions that they find in the place where they live. And not all kids live in circumstances that support academic focus. And those who are lucky enough to live in circumstances that are academically oriented, they got ahead. And it's completely inequitable in terms of what happens to the students who don't have the supportive academic setting at home. And one of the things that we tried to do at 10 Strands was to figure out how can we help bridge that equity gap. And we teamed up with a couple of organizations who focused on the same issue and realized that, well, if we could open up more space around the schools to act as additional classroom space, we could bring more kids back to the campus and reduce that equity gap. And so the idea, we called it the Outdoor Learning Initiative, and we teamed up with Green Schoolyards America, Lawrence Hall of Science, and the San Mateo County Office of Ed, and created a whole community where outdoor education became like Plan A, and Plan B was, bring the kids inside. It took off, and in 2020, articles all over the country, 40 different articles, 120 or something now, have written about the idea of using outdoor classroom space to enhance learning. Yeah, so that was the big pivot that we did for that year. Mm-hmm.
So Will, people when they look us up will know that I serve on your advisory board as well, and a lot of conversations around environmental literacy and environmental groups often point to the incredible whiteness of those organizations, and yours is a prominently white organization as well. But you, more than a year ago, made a pivot to centering equity and social justice and access for all, opportunities for all into your work. What led you to that moment, and how do you encourage others in the environmental movement to be focused on those issues of equity as well?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, I think realizing the huge disparity in the racial ethnicity of teachers versus students in California was one of the key motivating factors. As you say, the teaching profession is vastly white in its ethnicity, and for kids to be coming to school and not seeing anybody in the entire school that looks like them has an impact on them where they can't imagine themselves maybe in that same role. So we started down the path of equity, inclusion training, and teamed up with an organization called Youth Outside, recently changed its name to Justice Outside, and had hour-long sessions every other week with our whole staff to uncover our own implicit biases, because the work really starts inside before, at least for me, before I can fully appreciate others, really empathize with others' perspectives, realizing I can never live in somebody else's shoes, but I can certainly be understanding and curious and ask questions and learn about others' perspectives. That training has continued to a 6-week course that we're currently in, 3 hours every week, with the National Equity Project. And this work of understanding equity, both the core of it, how it is greatly affected by the history of systemic education, and how it works in day-to-day lives, is crucial to making sure that we can give all students the opportunity to become environmentally literate. And we've internalized it as well. So now our staff, we are more diverse than white. We have 5 people of color and 4 white people, 4 people in the north and 5 people in the south of California. And so that the perspective that we gain from people with different lived experiences inform education policy, our thinking about our work in this world, in crucial ways that connect with the broader population than what's traditionally been the case, to your point, in the environmental field.
It's so exciting to watch you take a leadership role in that area. And so the next question I have is, so how does care and being caring play into your decision making? And if you can give an example, that'd be wonderful.
Right. So in my decision making, I'm thinking about, what can 10 Strands do in the areas where students need something the most, right? And to me, caring is about teaching the stewardship of oneself, stewardship of one's community, stewardship of the environment in that community and in the broader context. Care to me means, what do teachers need? And so when you combine it all to students, teachers, community, and environment, that's the confluence of all of the areas that we focus on, and where we try to influence policy to make to put into motion either budget allocations or legislation that supports student-centered equity education. So the example that I would give would be what happened in March of 2020. I referred a moment ago to the Outdoor Learning Initiative, and the fact that we pivoted from our work of environmental literacy policy level in California to really caring about what was needed in the moment. Our CEO, Karen, noticed this huge opportunity and huge gap. And so we jumped in and did everything we could to try to make the schools safe for kids to come back by using the outdoors, as I explained earlier. So that would be a specific example of where we pivoted through caring.
Can you give me an example of when it's been challenged, where putting an ethic of caring and, as you use the word, stewardship as a guiding principle, by adhering to those principles, that it wasn't as effective, or it was challenged or didn't work as well as you would have liked?
I'm feeling challenged right now, Hardin, because I think it is absolutely so sad that there are students who are deciding not to have kids because of their despair over what they hear about climate change. And what they're hearing about climate change is coming through the media. And the media isn't, they're not scientists. And the media isn't set up to educate, people. It's set up with different, corporate goals, which are perfectly appropriate. The problem, the despair that I feel is where kids just soak in whatever they're learning from online or through the media as fact. And as, oh my God, it's really, there's nothing we can do. And so learning about the connection to the environment, and then sort of taking apart some of the claims that are made in the media, is a great basis for critical thinking and for producing curiosity. Gee, is that a fact or is that an opinion?
Yeah.
If it's an opinion, what's the source of the evidence for that opinion? Same question can be asked of the fact. And as soon as you start peeling it away, you realize, well, I realized when I was a teacher, and I'm seeing it now, that not only do we have to give the opportunity for learning in schools, but we have to give the opportunity for unlearning because we have to unlearn, the students need to unlearn some of the things that they're learning through the media, right? And so if you take a look at some of the claims that have been made throughout, since 1970 about, the world is going to end in the next 10 or 15 years, well, it hasn't happened, and it's not likely to happen. And so I wish to bring into the thinking, gee, what do some of the great scientists say about where we are? And everybody says it's dire, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But then we have people like E.O. Wilson, Edward O. Wilson, one of the greatest biologists in the world, who in his book, The Meaning of Human Existence, digs into, we can't have despair and hope to get out of this. We need innovation and we need creativity. And the best place for those feelings and initiatives to come through, let me restate that. The worst place is to try to get at them through fear. and through being scared.
Yeah.
And then there are folks like Paul Hawken, one of my heroes, who wrote Drawdown, and now he's just finished a new book called Regeneration. And it's all about the steps that all humans can take, corporations can take, legislations can take to adapt and mitigate to climate change. Because no matter what we do, the CO2 in the atmosphere, this thickening blanket is there to stay for quite a long time. We are going to have some warming. And so we have two challenges, and that is to bring an opportunity to learn about, well, how are we going to adapt to that? And how are we going to mitigate it from getting any worse than it can, right? And there are loads of opportunities there. There's a lot of excitement around all industries, supply chain management, water usage, energy usage, that will slow down the worst impacts of climate change and give students, well, all of us, a reason to be optimistic about the future, even have hope.
You use the phrase relearn, but I just want to capture that you didn't then go on to talk about facts. You produced a way of thinking and addressing problems, moving from kind of a fact-based or an information-based decision, someone told me this or I saw that, to more of a critical analysis, more of a where's the evidence? How can I think about this? What are other people say? How can I take other perspectives before I come to my opinion? So is that kind of the process that, as you think of yourself as a science educator, that you want to help promote within our schools and within our youth?
Yes, and even more than as just a science, I don't mean just a science educator, but the thing that Dr. Wilson said in his book was, we're not going to really achieve our greatest potential for success until the humanities and the science come together. Not exactly in a marriage, but in a collaboration. Because there are facts which exist in indigenous knowledge that science hasn't gotten around to prove yet, and maybe won't prove, but it doesn't mean they're false. And so there's a huge, vast amount of storytelling that contains very important, crucial information about humans' relationship to the environment. So this appalls me, but in California, which is where my expertise is, and I'm not sure about the rest of the nation, but science gets taught in middle school 8 minutes a week on average. It is absurd. And some places get up to a whole hour. It is science, let alone in environmental science. And so we at 10 Strands have realized that the basis for focusing on the environment is much more than just science. And so in California, we took the approach, well, how can we give students an opportunity to learn in every single subject about a connection through the environment? So the environment becomes the connective tissue amongst all the different subjects. And so over a consistent 6-year period, 10 Strands was invited to help edit each of the frameworks. You can think of them as hoops that publishers have to jump through in order for their material to be adopted in California. And so in each subject now, there's a section about some lesson plans need to be taught through an environmental lens. Now, it's not specific about exactly what, leaving creativity and curiosity, both on the publisher side, but also then on the teacher side as well. And so in California, we're achieving this sense that connection through the environment to the core subjects is a great way to increase students' awareness of the interrelationship between the student and the environment. And it's much more than just the scientific awareness of the connection.
Yeah, I mean, in my work with you, you've convinced me that if we're going to have a fundamental discipline around which we can integrate everything, environmental science, that would be a great place to start. It is so integrated. You put it can bring science, it can bring humanities, it can bring arts, it can bring physical activity, and that you can really coordinate a whole child's learning organized around learning their place in the environment and how valuable that would be and engaging in many ways.
Can I give just two very quick examples?
Great, please.
Yeah. So in California, of course, we have the gold rush. And until recently, it wasn't routinely taught that it had a huge impact on the environment and results in mercury being in our San Francisco Bay, polluting the shellfish. And that's why we can't eat the shellfish in San Francisco, right? So there's a historical environmental connection that students find fascinating. And then there are examples of teachers not knowing what to focus on in their environment to bring kids closer to a subject. So in science, a teacher discovered that at one time before the school had been paved over, there was a little frog that lived there. And so she said to her fifth grade science students, let's go out and see if we can see the frog this winter. And so as the rains came, they actually found a little pool that had some baby frogs in it. And the class adopted the frogs, the school adopted the frogs. There was a great effort to clean up the school, no more pollution. What about the little frogs? And and the science behind it, and hydrologic science, and the history, and where to come from, and all of this sort of stuff.
Maybe I would have gone past 10th grade biology if I had had that type of engagement. But well, on a shift, you know, when you think about character, that's one of the principles that we think a lot about here at the center. What does that mean to you? And how do you see it playing in your role in decision making as a leader?
Right. So character has so many different elements to it in terms of what it means to individuals, from honesty to integrity to having a caring and loving attitude toward fellow human beings, and keeping your word, and all of those things, which are super important. So to me, I focus more on the caring aspect through the word of stewardship. And I think, what am I doing with my, X number of decades on life? How can I steward my resources in a way that that feels good to me, but frankly, and that, what I've decided is, I want to use those resources to see if we can get the education system, to increase this idea of stewardship that we all have for each other, for our communities, and ultimately my personal interest is for the environment. But the caring element of stewardship, if you can create a sense of this curiosity and agency, ownership over decisions that you can actually make, well, then stewardship becomes embedded in the sense of character, to take care of something, somebody, some places outside yourself, in addition to taking care of, of your own self. So that's
so as a leader, then when you make the decision for your organization, for your own personal decisions about life, do you organize, how can this decision help steward and improve quality of living within our environment, in relation to our environment, within our environment, and that becomes a guiding principle in terms of, if you can answer that question in the positive, you're ready to go. If you can't, you're going to wait until you can figure it out.
Yeah, for me, it starts with empathy, or empathizing, and asking questions. Character and this development of a stewardship idea doesn't come in from somebody coming in and saying, hey, you have to be stewards, right? It has to do with asking questions and asking, well, what do students need to have a better learning environment? What do districts and what do principals need? And if you can ask those questions and be invited into a conversation about what those needs are, and have an opportunity to apply some of the stewardship through the environmental lens concept, there's a chance that it will stick and resonate, and there's also a chance that it won't. And so I believe it's our job to create the opportunity to understand what it is when we say stewardship of the environment can improve students' lives in the classroom, outside the classroom, in the community. Here's some evidence where it's worked,
Mhm.
and here's some evidence where it's been really challenging. And can we help you, teacher, principal, superintendent of a district, or county office of ed?
No, Will, one of the things as I listen to, I'm struck with an idea that I want to share. So we think that the character is not something necessarily you have. I mean, you may have character. We all have different characteristics, but it's not something you have. It's something you do. That character is an active agent. How do you take your values perspective into the world to use your word, steward um, our world? And that's an active, not a passive event. That's something one
Mhm,
has, is something one does.
mhm. No, I think that's right. Yeah, I like that distinction, because that the old cliche, actions speak louder than words, sort of thing.
Mhm, mhm.
It's easy to talk about intentions and make promises, but as we look to what a person's character really is, it's much less about what they say, and observing and assessing their actions.
Yeah, I mean,
Mhm,
even Kenny talks about racism not necessarily being something you are. You're not a racist.
mhm,
Racism is something we do,
mhm,
and
mhm,
it's the policies we enact, it's behaviors we represent, and it's not an intentions to be good or bad aren't as significant as what you actually do and the impact. And understanding that and
mhm,
responding, because we all make errors, we all make mistakes.
mhm,
Responding is really critical. So
mhm,
in terms of, one of the challenges in all our work is in your work, you have lots of constituents, politicians, community, superintendents, kids, other people in the environmental community. So how do you manage and balance your commitments to these multiple constituents?
mhm, mhm,
This is our sense. We think this is part of what building communities is about. You talk
mhm,
about collaborating with a number of groups, working together, but in terms of balancing the competing needs, how does
mhm,
that? How do you approach that challenge?
mhm, mhm. It's, I think the first step is to realize that I don't have the answers for the right balance for anybody,
Mhm.
and or any institution. Um, I think what I think what I haven't quite talked about it this way, I don't think, but 10 strands in this notion of being a tugboat. There's also a notion of being a catalyst and a convener. Um, and we create the conditions where communities of practice can form.
Mhm.
And we do this, we specifically started 5 or 6 years ago, uh, with an organization that's now called the California Environmental Literacy Initiative.
Mhm.
And we manage this partnership, um, with 30 different people, all these different constituencies, uh, not having answers, but putting the container in place where people can come in and populate the container,
Mhm.
find similar interests, and develop communities of practice. So we have several sort of working groups we call innovation hubs. And there's an innovation hubs for county offices of ed, one for professional learning, another for curriculum, and several others. Um, and we help bring in speakers or materials, but more than that, we offer up the intelligence, the character, all of the all of the aspects that your institution promotes and advances. We let all of that surface in a way of helping people connect in areas where they're similar and where they're different, and can learn from each other from
Mhm.
those
Mhm.
differences.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, so I would say, so balancing the different constituencies is really something that happens innately, and in a way that maybe we're putting out the scale or something, and then it operates on its own.
You know, you described something that's very hard to pull off, and you did it gracefully, and it's working. So what do you think you and your organization, because I know that you're very aware that you have a team approach and you're collaborating with your team as you're also reaching out to collaborate with others. What would you say are some of the core either values and or behaviors that you all consistently demonstrate that people then come back for more?
Mm,
Because
mm,
we can all give a great workshop with a good speaker with good and a one shot show. Everyone feels
mm,
good, but not everyone comes back to stay engaged. People are coming
mhm,
back to stay engaged with you. What do you
mhm,
think what you and team are doing to facilitate that ongoing engagement?
mm, mhm, mhm, mm. Well, there's a certain part of authenticity, I think, that helps, which is, we authentically don't want to be at the center. 10 strand, you won't hear anything about 10 strands this or 10 strands that in terms of, rah, rah, 10 strands. Because for us, everything at the center has to be about the mission.
Mm-hmm.
And the mission can be developed and molded best by collaborative efforts with the minds and the hearts and the souls of people throughout the state. And so the idea is to kind of leave the egos at the door.
Mm-hmm.
What are we here for? We're here for the students
Mm-hmm.
and to improve the system. How can we do that? It's not about advancing your own personal agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And people get that. And so people don't come in and say, oh God, I got to listen to that again.
Yeah.
And nor do if you were to come in and listen to the amount of time that the leaders of the Cali meeting speak, I think you'd be surprised at the balance between, oh, Karen and the other executive committee leaders only spoke this much, and all the community members spoke that much. So there's a nice way about that. And
Mm-hmm.
then we always, well, hold on, I can't say that. There are two quick things. I push for the idea of conversations happen best with a yes and approach rather than the yes but approach. And so there's a general sense about that in this Cali. And so ideas come up. And when you have a yes and approach, people are much more willing to come out with an idea, even if it's not an idea that floats everybody's boat.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
And so you can get to some really good places that way. And then there's another piece about we encourage people to look for other people with whom to collaborate. So where is somebody in this hub doing something that somebody in this hub could actually benefit from? So there's lots of conversations that happen as a result of people connecting,
Mm-hmm.
through the Cali meeting. Yeah.
In our world, we hear a lot about how businesses get created with collaboration and working together and finding strengths and reorganizing people's strengths. And I'm not sure we hear as much about that in the not-for-profit social
Mhm.
service world. But you just gave a great example of how that openness to collaboration, other people hold truths more than equal and powerful truths, regardless of their background, and that how do we steward these relationships on an ongoing basis. And if one can maintain, I'm hearing you say, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm hearing you say that as one can maintain that stance, that set of values, and authentically behave in congruence with those values, that's when people start to come together, find a sense of collaboration, and feel that power of the group to move forward.
Mhm.
Am I capturing what your experience or?
Yeah, really well, Hardin. And I would add on to that the relationship with the funding community is an important factor. So if you
Mhm.
think of the for-profit world, people respond to the quality of the product by their purchasing it or their service by purchasing it or not purchasing it. There's the
Mhm.
direct relationship. In the nonprofit world, that's not the case. People, the ones who provide the money aren't purchasers of the services. The ones who provide the money are the readers of the reports by the people that provide the services.
Yep.
And the funders typically look for differentiation. How is your organization doing something that's slightly different than this organization, right? And there's a movement that's afoot now called trust philanthropy,
Mhm.
where funders are given an opportunity to let the community decide how best to use the money that's been defined to fix a particular purpose. And it's a different way of philanthropy, and I'm seeing it more and more. And as that funder shift happens, collaboration becomes easier because people aren't, trying to hang on to what their essential identity is that the foundation needs to fund, as opposed to, your organization. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, when you listen to the other podcasts that would be putting up, there's a Mosaic Hakabin, and you speak the same language, dealing with very different problems, very different ecology. But that idea of hearing local voice, collaboration networks is central to the moving forward, and that funders need to get in that boat with us, not hold the stick in the short term.
That's right.
That they really have to say, okay, how do we collaborate with you to get these outcomes that we share?
Right.
So, Will, thanks so much for your time. But before I let you go, I want to get a sense of if you could go and say something to your younger self when you were starting out on this pathway, and because you've had enough of a variety of these issues, you can pick which younger self you want to talk to. What advice would you give him?
I think the first would be build coalitions and collaborate. In my first bit of my career, I was interested in, I had much more ego involved. And so I was interested in making a name for myself, having a successful business, in alternative energy. And the second falls right onto that, which is team up with a partner who has complementary skills. And really look for that type of partnership, and be rigorous in the analysis of, don't turn to your friend, or try to find a really strong, be honest about what skills somebody could enhance through a partnership, put it that way.
Well, there's two sides to that. Well, be honest and clear about what you're good at.
Yes. Yeah.
And don't need to replicate. And then the areas in which, through partnership, what aren't your strengths and foci would be complemented to make a better team.
That's right. Exactly right. Yep. And then this one I mentioned before, it's not about ego, it's about the mission. And I would keep that in mind. And then I would say, when the going gets rough, practice joyous persistence. That's the key thing that keeps me going now, and could have maybe changed my trajectory at an earlier age, but who knows, and who really cares? I'm happy where I am now. But it's the joyous persistence, as opposed to, being persistent because, you're going to prove something, or out of entitlement that it must be this way or whatever. But, because your perspective isn't going to be, my perspective isn't going to be the perspective that a county office of ed person has. Nobody's going to have my perspective. And so if I can joyously persist in explaining and listening and understanding, if there's, something that both of us can collaborate and work together with, that's great. And it's not my timeline, right? It's the timeline that works for both parties. And so to be joyous with however long that takes and whatever direction it takes, because ultimately life's a journey. And if we can be if I can be joyful as I go down my journey of life, it's more fun for me.
Well, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate this, and we really deeply admire the work that you're doing, and the ways in which you've created a network that's moving, the network that's got that tugboat that's moving, a very difficult organization called PK-12 Education forward in the interest of kids. So thank you very, very much.
No, you're very welcome, Hardin, and thank you for the opportunity to be with you, and I can't wait to see you soon.
Great. You take care. Yeah.
Thanks, you too.